How's it going, guys, and welcome to 4MAR Ranch. Today we are going to be revisiting the IS-EG NGAL Clone. So if you have no idea what you're looking at, this is an NGAL, however you want to pronounce it, stands for Next Generation Aiming Laser. This one in particular is a clone. This is the IS-EG version, meaning it's a collaboration between InvisbleSight and Evolution Gear. Evolution Gear actually being a company that makes a lot of pretty realistic airsoft clones. Really is the market that they're going after, the milsim market using airsoft gear. That being said, this has taken up a ton of interest and is building rapid reputation in the night vision community because it can actually hold up to some of the real steel counterparts. And what I wanted to do is evaluate how well it holds up to different adverse conditions, especially seeing as this thing has gotten over 500,000 views on my channel in the last 3 or so months. I want to do my due diligence and continue putting out good information for you guys. Now, this is a different unit than the one I did my full-fledged review on that is up on the channel. I encourage you to watch that if you have not done so already. Point being, this is not a follow-up to that unit. That unit is still doing great. It's still being run. Zero issues whatsoever. It holds zero. It's great. It's been used on both 30 cal and 5.56. And so just know that this is not an update. This is me testing a separate sample size to give you guys different data. So I kind of kicked around different ways that I wanted to evaluate how solid this thing can hold up. And the best thing I came up with for this video is to see if we can get these laser diodes to shift relative to each other in a series of different conditions. So as a control, first thing I did was go ahead and pattern where these diodes were relative to each other right out of the box without being beat up or mounted or used in any other form or fashion. Now, do keep in mind, if I can get the camera to focus, that there is a physical offset of the lasers vertically, so we don't penalize the unit for that. That offset ended up being equidistant to where these lasers were patterned. However, you notice there's a horizontal offset that ended up being a 2.7 MOA offset. This is all taken from 10 yards, so 2.7 MOA offset came from a 0.27 inch physical offset at 10 yards converts to 2.7. Hopefully you guys can do math with me there. Now, the next test I wanted to do is see how it does with different thermal exposures. So first we started in the cold. I threw it in my freezer for an hour. I immediately took it out and took a look at where things shifted. So here is after the cold exposure. Now, although these diodes are now closer together and it looks like it's better, we know that there's a physical offset, and this new shift ended up being a 2.1 MOA offset. It's now converging. They're getting closer together when they shouldn't be, and they actually slightly narrowed as well to a 0.26 inch physical offset, which converted to 2.6 MOA at that 10 yards we measured. So when it's literally below freezing, there is a little bit of shift. In my opinion, this is still completely usable. But okay, so we move things. There's some, there's materials contracting inside the IS-EG. That's no surprise, right? What's important is what happens when it returns to ambient. So I let it return to room temperature, and what do you know? It went back to where it was right out of the gate for this control group. So that's good news, right? It essentially passes the cold exposure test. Now up next, I wanted to expose it to a little bit of heat. By heat, I chose 170 degrees arbitrarily, purely not because that's as low as my oven can get. That's actually why I did it. Because I feel like 170 degrees is probably above and beyond what you'd probably expect for ambient environment. And in my experience, when I'm doing mag dumps with these kind of units, I typically see the heat soak to about 100 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit through a hot handguard to the housing of these units. So I pushed it up a notch and wanted to see what we would get. Now, one note that I did make is that it did start out in 170 degree environments, but by the time I got it mounted to my test bench, the exterior had dropped to 106 degrees Fahrenheit. So do keep that in mind. That's the exterior. It's getting the benefit of air cooling. I would believe that the internals were still going to be warmer than that surface of the unit, but that is the data we collected. And we once again had a very slight shift. So this time it was only a 0.3 MOA shift. Now, once again, we allowed it to cool to ambient. So this is after the cold and heat exposure. And I was surprised to see that it returned back to the starting position. So it seems like whatever they're doing to secure those diodes is good to go when you thermally cycle it. Now, keep in mind, guys, I did this one time each. I bet if I did it 10 to 100 times, we'd probably see this start drifting. I didn't have enough time to do that. I'm just reporting the data I tested, but it's a good sign that it doesn't appear to start drifting. So next thing that I knew people would probably want to see is what happens when you drop this thing. So I first went ahead and got a 0. I confirmed where it was relative to the setup I threw it on for the sake of this test. I did intentionally choose my 10.5-inch setup with a Geisley handguard because Geisley handguards are known to be rock solid, and I didn't want any perceived shifting to be as a result of a faulty handguard. Nonetheless, got that 0 and I dropped it. Now we repeated this process, and each time I checked the 0, and each time after doing a drop, the 0 did shift. So this unit did not hold 0 when dropped directly on it from shoulder height. And for those saying you dropped it into the dirt, trust me, if you've ever been to South Texas in the summer, that dirt is clay, and that clay hasn't seen water in months, and it's essentially concrete. It is rock solid. So don't think I'm trying to baby or cheat the drop test, but that are the test conditions that we went ahead and did.
Sorry guys, out of focus, but hopefully you can tell it did drop. But you know what? Go ahead and just drop it again. Those 2 drops in one, in case the haters want to say it was fake. Unit is still on through both those drops directly onto the unit. We did a total of 3 drop tests. Here was our first control, just showing where I got it zeroed, right? We then dropped it from shoulder height, which some people may say is not super reasonable, but that's what we did. And to those saying, well, it wasn't on concrete, it is currently like 105 degrees out. That's why I'm drenched in sweat. South Texas, so the heat index at least. Our clay floor here is like concrete. It is ridiculously hard. So I mean, it's got 0 give. Dropped it from shoulder height. First group shifted left and up. It was a nice tight group, so you can tell like it's not me as the shooter. We had a noticeable shift. I said, okay, maybe I didn't torque it good enough, so I redid the mounting procedure. I torqued it from 30 inch-pounds initially, now to 35. So I didn't go crazy with it, but 35 is not bad either. I then confirmed where the 0 should be. So this one, not as well zeroed as control 1, but so in a perfect world, shot another group after dropping, it should look a little low of that bullseye. Same exact shooting position where we zeroed is where we shot. So about a 1/2 inch underneath bullseye. Again, a nice tight group giving us good control. I dropped it twice. It was supposed to be 1 additional drop, but as you saw from the footage, it was out of focus, and I didn't want the haters to say I did some voodoo. So I went ahead and said, screw it, let's drop it again in focus. And we got another shift, this one being the worst. This is about, 2 inches directly above. I'm dropping it directly on the unit, so this could actually just be it physically moving. I'll have to, me at the time of recording, I haven't verified if those diodes have shifted or not. Given that we've now done it twice, I verified it was a repeatable. It does shift, so whether it's it on the rail or the diodes inside, this is a repeatable incident. So I think that's good enough for the drop test, because we showed there is an issue. It's not like it's surviving or passing this test. So 3 drop tests, and we have identified that it might be shifting.
I did go ahead and pattern those diodes once again to see, did they shift physically from each other, or is it purely just the unit shifting on the handguard? And I was actually surprised there was virtually no shift once again. So this unit so far is proving to be pretty resilient in terms of all these different things that you're seeing it being put through. But now skipping forward to what I've probably seen in my comments the most is what happens if it gets wet, given that they don't advertise that it's waterproof or overly water resistant.
What if you use it in the rain? I can actually see it draining into the top screw hole right now on the selector. Laser is obviously still on. The problem is what kills electronics is not necessarily the water, it's the mineral deposits left in water, right? So unfortunately, it's probably going to be a minute until the corrosion from any mineral deposits actually set in from the water. I don't foresee this causing any issues, and no shock, the laser is just fine so far. Anyways, simulating rain for you guys, and we'll see if I'll have to report back if this ends up killing the unit. Try not to ruin my camera sensor, but you can see the laser is on. Basically pouring it in those open holes on top, turrets. Everything is getting nicely soaked. Obviously, if it was getting this soaked, that'd be a pretty heavy rainstorm. It's not super realistic for just casual rain. I don't think casual rain would be an issue, but I'm doing this to this unit so you don't have to. All right, let's see if we get any more pooling. And yes, this is painful for me. See if this thing still works. Looks like it's not pointed at my camera sensor. Laser still works. Be surprised if it didn't. You see the water under that lens. So, depending on the time you're watching this, what I'm gonna have to do is pin a comment and let you guys know when the water potentially killed this, because I have a feeling it's gonna take some time and you guys aren't gonna wanna hang around for a few weeks or months. But there you go, definitely not waterproof, not advertised as waterproof, and I guess there's a reason why.
So my target for this was these safety screw holes, because for as best I can tell, they just go straight down into the unit, and it appeared that they did act as drains and water just went right down into the unit. I could tell that there's a decent amount of epoxy around the fire button, so that looks sealed. I didn't necessarily target that, but I did also target the adjustment turrets. That being said, even with the water in there, there was not any immediate issues. The unit continued to function. The interesting thing is, about 24 hours later, after it got home from the range, whenever I would switch the unit into any on positions, it would just actuate. So right now, you'll notice that it's back to normal. I have to physically press this button to get it to actuate. So spoiler alert, it is still working. But for almost a full 7 days, if I switched it into any on position, it would just stay on. So the moisture seemed to be shorting a connection on the motherboard somehow, and was just making it active as long as this switch wasn't in a dead position or the off position. I was gonna give it 7 days until I did like an isopropyl alcohol rinse to see if I can get that the water and the minerals off of that board and kind of go from there. And at 6.5 days after the water logging test, it just started working. So the unit is back to being normal, with the caveat that now there's the dried residue behind the water, or from water behind this lens, that now make this laser not so pleasing. It's got a lot of that laser being diffused, and this is true for any mode, both the IR, which you'll see when I show you the footage of me patterning it again, and unfortunately the illuminator kind of gets this as well. So none of it is, you know, as it was right out of the box. I did already reach out to InvisbleSight and let him know what happened. I let the owner know, and obviously you're seeing this video. I'm not changing the results. I'm not withholding results. This is what happened. He said that, I mean, he likes to use the term mediocre technicians, which you can see on his website. He said that these holes should have been sealed by the guys that are assembling the IS-EGs. He recommends that, you know, would I want to fix that? Just drop some epoxy in there, put the screws in, let the epoxy set down at the bottom of those screw wells. So for anyone that has ordered these, I would maybe recommend you go ahead and do that. If you think it's a deal breaker that it gets waterlogged that easy, totally understandable, but it is what it is. Me personally, if I was worried about it, I think, you know, most of the time at night, we're probably gonna be in dual high, and then you kind of control your laser strength with that. You can still get to your divergence and convergence. I'd probably just throw like a piece of maybe electrical tape or duct tape or something on top just to give you that water shield. Again, this is 10% of the cost, guys, so we kind of got to pick and choose that. Or if you saw my comparison video with what L3 appears to do, I mean, they just coat the ever-living crap out of all the edges where different things meet up with epoxy. So they basically just pot everything that they can, as best I can tell. So you guys can maybe try that route. So this may end up being a little bit more of a DIY project than many of the people that are interested in the IS-EG thought, but again, it is what it is. These are the results. This is the sample that was sent for this, and that is how it performed. You guys draw your own conclusions. That was really my intention of this video. I think for the $500 mark, you can't really complain so much. You're getting 10% of the cost of the real thing, and for 95% of us, this thing's probably gonna work. I don't think you need it to be able to go diving with and go take a swim with. Rain is probably gonna be a concern. I suggested simple fixes for that I think still justify the price tag. So anyways, guys, I'm gonna stop rambling. If there's any additional questions that this sparked, leave a comment below. I try to be as responsive as possible. I do wanna thank you for taking the time to stop by and watch this latest video. And as always, have a good one.